Hey folks, Seth Liebson here. As we watch cities burn, statues being torn down, and calls to defund the police, if you haven't already, it may be time to think about personal protection. Guns Etc. has 10,200 square feet of guns, ammo, safes, and a staff that will work with you to find the best firearm for your situation. So stop by their huge store in Mesa or click on gunsetc.com and have access to over $400 million in firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back. Happy July 9th. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi was asked today by a reporter about the destruction of the Christopher Columbus statue in Baltimore. It's a city she grew up in. The question was, shouldn't that be done by a commission of the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor? Her answer, quote, "People will do what people will do," close quote. It's an interesting answer, and I wonder what the limiting principle should or could be. People disagreed with your tax hike in Congress and torched Congress down to protest. Kevin McCarthy's response was simple. People will do what people will do. Keep in mind, when I tell you Ilhan Omar is not part of the Democratic Party but represents it, this answer by Nancy Pelosi is Exhibit X or Y or Z. The leaders of the party, time and again, have been given the opportunity to denounce the anarchists, and they refuse. They won't do it. They refuse and won't do it because they cannot. They cannot because this is their party. Nancy Pelosi said more, though, today in that answer. She continued on to say, when children come to her office for tours and the like, she always points to the statues they see around the halls of Congress and in Washington, and points out that the people depicted in those statues would want them to think about the future, never the past, but to look forward, never backward. Well, in some respects, maybe that's true, but she's so terribly wrong on the main point. First, every statesman we honor, of course, looked back, especially to our founders. Every president, even Nancy Pelosi herself. How many times ad nauseum, with the emphasis on nauseum, did we hear Nancy Pelosi quoting Benjamin Franklin during the impeachment trial about a republic, if you can keep it? I get that there's a desire in the left and the Democratic Party to rewrite our past, and it doesn't mean they're right to do so. The only way they get to rewrite it is by distorting it, and the best way to distort it is to tell people not to look at it, not to study it, not to do their own research. Thus, I give you the state of American history education in our country today. And the stat I think most important is that 50%, half of our high school seniors get an F in American history. Because if you do study it seriously, and not via the work of ideologists like Howard Zinn, you find it to be a beautiful thing, as Frederick Douglass did, as Martin Luther King did, as Lincoln did, as dissenters in the Dred Scott decision did. Remember, and I will not tire of saying this, those who think our founding racist or rotten embrace the history of America as recited by the majority in the Dred Scott decision. We conservatives, we embrace Justices Curtis and McLean, who had a better history in their dissent in the Dred Scott case, because it showed our founders intended to include all men of all colors in our Declaration and in our founding and in our Constitution. See my monologue from yesterday on that, or just read Benjamin Curtis's dissent in Dred Scott. I'm proud to stand with it. Let the left side with Roger B. Taney. But this notion of America as racist from the get-go, revived as it has been by the modern Democratic Party and the BLM movement, is not new. As I said, it found credence in Dred Scott. It found credence in the Confederacy. It was quiet for a while, but it was given great attention back in 2007 and 2008. Anyone recall the name Jeremiah Wright, Barack Obama's pastor? He of 9/11 being the chickens coming home to roost. He of no, not God bless America, GD America. It's in the Bible for killing innocent people, GD America. For treating her citizens as less than human, GD America, for as long as she acts like she is God and she is supreme. Close quote. Sounding like Malcolm X or Louis Farrakhan. And you get that still today from Louis Farrakhan. You also get it from Colin Kaepernick. But back when Jeremiah Wright was in the news, Harry Jaffa, who I spoke about yesterday, wrote a response to him. We could use it again today. The principles upon which this nation were founded are those upon which its survival, no less than its posterity, depend. These are the principles upon which we believe our freedom and our prosperity as individuals and that of our children depend. These principles are simple and familiar enough for anyone to understand who wishes to understand. Selfish motives, miseducation, or ideological blindness may lead some to deny or disparage them, but nothing can obscure their shining truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Lincoln at Gettysburg said that the nation, at its birth, had been dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Earlier, Lincoln had said that the proposition of equality was the central idea of the founding, from which all its minor thoughts emanated. What exactly did these words of both the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address mean? They meant that there was no difference between one human being and another human being. That made one the master and the other the servant. As Jefferson once put it, I quoted this the other day as well, some men are not born with saddles on their backs, nor are others born booted and spurred to ride them. That a man or woman rides a horse corresponds with the difference in their natures. No injustice is done to the horse. That an ox should pull a plow while a man walks behind is according to nature. In these cases, servitude follows from the laws of nature. But these same laws of nature tell us that when a human being is subjected to other human beings as if he were a horse or an ox, the laws of nature are violated. All human beings are accordingly equal in their right not to be enslaved, and in their right to be in secure possession of their lives, their liberties, and of course their property. To this end, they have a right to be governed only by laws to which they have consented. That all men are created equal does not mean that human beings are the same or equal in size, strength, beauty, virtue, or intelligence. There are obviously great difference in individual aptitudes and talents in sports, music, math, speaking, writing, and the like. They are also unequal in the virtues, among them courage, temperance, and justice. But as Jefferson once said, the fact that Sir Isaac Newton may be the most intelligent of living human beings does not give him any right whatsoever to my person or my property. If there is no natural authority of any human being over any other, leaving aside perhaps the temporary authority of parents over children, how does lawful authority arise? In the words of the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, quote, "The body politic is formed by a voluntary association of individuals. It is a social compact by which the whole people covenants with each citizen, and each citizen with the whole people, that shall be governed by certain laws for the common good." Close quote. It cannot be too greatly emphasized that the political community is a voluntary association, so that in obeying the law, we are obeying ourselves, Mrs. Speaker. In obeying the law, we seek to provide a greater security for the rights which have from God and which come from God and nature, but which rights we cannot provide for ourselves or by ourselves alone. The just powers of government in the Declaration of Independence, not any powers, notice it says the just powers of government, arise for no other purpose than the protection of those rights which are antecedent to government. Governments exist to protect these rights. The rights themselves do not come from government. In the protection of these rights, no citizen is entitled to greater or to lesser protection than any other. Here is the original meaning of the equal protection of the laws. No one is entitled to greater protection than any of his fellow citizens because of his wealth, birth, or intelligence. Nor is anyone entitled to exemption from taxation or from service in the common defense because of any claim of superior personal worth. The Declaration of the Causes and Necessities of Taking Up Arms on July 6, 1775, was the very first occasion for the American people to speak to the world with a single voice. Has anyone read it? Has anyone been taught it? In its very first sentence, the Second Continental Congress affirmed without equivocation that the idea of the ownership of some human beings by other human beings was an utter absurdity, and that to think otherwise was incompatible with both reason and revelation, not to mention nature. Thus, from the outset, an entire year before the Declaration of Independence, the American people were committed to the anti-slavery cause and to the inseparability of personal freedom and free government. The American people knew from the outset that the cause of their own freedom and that of the slaves was inseparable. This would become the message that Abraham Lincoln would bring to the American people and to the world for all time. In the decade from the Declaration to the Constitution, every state north of the Mason-Dixon line and north of the Ohio River either abolished slavery or adopted measures leading to its abolition. But in 1793, the cotton gin was invented, shortly after the power loom in England. This was the onset of the Industrial Revolution. Almost overnight, a new industry, or rather a series of new industries, proliferating worldwide, was born. It began with the growing of cotton, but was followed by its manufacture into a wide variety of products, especially cotton cloth and cotton clothing. Suddenly, slave labor became vastly more profitable. In the decade before the Civil War, the value of slaves doubled. Once again, greed overwhelmed every other motive and virtue. From being regarded as a temporary evil, as it was at the founding, slavery came to be regarded as a positive and permanent good in part of the country. This changed attitude toward slavery was, however, part of a changed attitude toward morality in general that was sweeping over Western civilization. This change was marked by the apotheosis of change itself. What had heretofore been regarded as moral absolutes came to be regarded as merely relative to a particular time and place, one might say to history or to progress, with no enduring claim upon our consciences. Lincoln praised Jefferson for embodying in the Declaration an abstract truth applicable to all men in all times, but the idea of such truth and of the correlation of such truth with justice was increasingly repudiated by the most educated and influential minds in the Western world. See John Calhoun or the Confederacy. But if history or progress or change is to be our guide, if the truth of relativism is to replace the truth of the Declaration, then the cause for which the nation fought at its birth and in the Civil War was meaningless. White power, black power, the Nazis, the KKK, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot are all as justifiable as Jefferson, Lincoln, or the doctrine of the equal natural rights of all human beings, if relativism is to be our guide. Or, as Pelosi put it, people will do what people will do. We may understand how the Reverend Jeremiah Wright could so awfully misunderstand the American political tradition, as we can understand his successors in Ilhan Omar and Colin Kaepernick, inasmuch as it has been so very misunderstood for so long in circles from whom a better understanding should be expected. But this misunderstanding is a cancer which can in the end prove fatal, not only to a political campaign, but to our country. If we are to have a foundation upon which to continue to build a more perfect union, we must unequivocally, as Lincoln returned to the source of our greatness in the American founding. Can we do that? I thank Professor Jaffa for that instruction. I'm Seth Leibson. Lines are open.